Money. We literally rely on it every single day, right? We stress about it, we trade our precious time for it, and we work incredibly hard to get it. Yet, if we're being honest, almost nobody actually understands how it works. Well, in today's explainer, we are mapping out the hidden truth about money. We're going to pull back the curtain and explore a seriously provocative claim from our source material, that what economics textbooks have been teaching about money for the last 250 years is actually a complete lie.
Now, according to the breakdown we're looking at today, all the confusion around modern money, it's not an accident. The creator of our source actually spent 6 years at an economics faculty. He read every major finance book he could possibly get his hands on, and he realized that everything he saw happening in the real world completely contradicted what was written in the textbooks. And get this, when he confronted his most trusted professor about it, the professor straight up admitted it. He knew the truth, but the textbook said otherwise. So, let's start from absolute zero and systematically uncover how this system actually works.
All right, Section 1, the myth of barter. So, did barter actually come first? To figure this out, we have to travel back to 1903, to a tiny Pacific island called Yap. The local money there consisted of these massive, unmovable limestone discs that weighed up to 4 tons. Seriously, 4 tons. Now imagine this. Years earlier, a family was transporting a particularly huge stone by canoe. A storm hit, and the stone sank straight to the bottom of the ocean. Nobody could see it, nobody could retrieve it. Yet somehow it still functioned perfectly as money. Why? Because the entire village simply agreed that the stone existed at the bottom of the ocean, and that it belonged to that family, so they could spend it. It's a brilliant proof that the value of money was always rooted in the community's agreement. It was never about the physical object itself.
And look, this isn't just some quirky, obscure island tale. We are talking about John Maynard Keynes and Milton Friedman, two of history's absolute fiercest rival economists. I mean, these guys disagreed on almost everything, but they both independently studied the Yap Islanders, and they both came to the exact same conclusion. They literally said, these people understand money better than we do. They recognize that money, at its very core, is simply a human agreement.
So, if it's an agreement, where did it all start? Well, Adam Smith logically deduced back in 1776 that early humans traded fish for bread, and then, invented money when things got a little too complicated. But Cambridge anthropologist Caroline Humphrey went looking and found absolutely zero historical evidence of this anywhere on Earth. None. Barter didn't come first. Actually, barter only really happens as an emergency backup plan, when money systems totally collapse, like we saw in Russia during the 1990s. What really came first, way before coins, were human promises and debt.
Which brings us to Section 2. Money is an agreement. Promises in clay.
Let's look a bit closer at those early promises. 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, people just scratched promises to repay debts right into clay tablets. For over 2 millennia, entire civilizations built huge cities and paid their workers using nothing but these recorded promises. The first actual coins didn't even show up until 2,700 years ago in Lydia. And then, much later, came Chinese paper money, the Bank of England in 1694, all the way down to the 1971 Nixon shock. The physical coin came way after the fact. The human promise was always first.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is how we actually define money. Think of it essentially as a measuring tool for value. It functions just like a minute measures time, right? A minute is exactly 60 seconds everywhere on Earth. It's perfectly stable. Well, money was supposed to be a stable measuring tool too. That's exactly why people historically tied it to physical gold. They needed a concrete, physical anchor to prevent anyone from silently changing the measurement. Because unlike a minute, which is rooted in nature, money relies entirely on human agreement.
Okay, moving on to Section 3, the paper money trap, from metal to paper.
Picture the Song Dynasty in China. Back then, the standard money was made of iron coins. But iron was incredibly heavy and genuinely dangerous to transport over long distances. So regular merchants solved this massive logistics nightmare by storing their iron at trusted local shops. They would simply trade the paper receipts instead of lugging the metal around. It was pure convenience, and honestly, it worked brilliantly. That is, until the government noticed, took over, and started issuing official paper money called jiaozi. To fund incredibly expensive wars, the government just started printing extra paper with no iron behind it. They effectively shrank the ruler, and in doing so, completely destroyed public trust.
Now, this exact same trap evolved later in 17th century London into modern banking. It's known as the goldsmith's trick. People paid goldsmiths a fee to safely store their gold in physical vaults, and then they'd trade the paper receipts. But the goldsmiths caught on to something clever. Only about 10% of people ever came to collect their physical gold at any one time. So they started secretly lending out extra, newly printed receipts to collect interest. It's literally like parking your car in a secure garage and the owner secretly rents it out to make money while you think it's just sitting there perfectly safe. Without even meaning to, they accidentally invented modern banking.
Next up, Section 4, Cutting the Gold Anchor, the 1971 shock.
Now, you'd probably think the goldsmith's trick would be outlawed eventually as total fraud, right? Nope. Instead, King William III made it completely official. In 1694, he created the Bank of England using the exact same goldsmith's trick just to fund his wars. Fast forward through the centuries. The world eventually tried to stabilize this wild paper system in 1944 by tying global currencies to the US dollar and then tying the dollar to physical gold. But by 1971, America was spending incredibly heavily and printing dollars just to cover the gap. When other countries started asking for their physical gold back, President Richard Nixon went on TV on a Sunday evening and just completely severed that final physical anchor.
The consequences of cutting that anchor were immediate, yet they were practically invisible to most people. Consider this staggering number for a second, 92%. Since that television broadcast in 1971, a standard $100 bill has lost 92% of its purchasing power. Today, it buys you roughly $8 worth of what it used to. The physical ink and numbers on the note stayed exactly the same, but the measuring stick, it was radically shrunk.
Which leads us right into Section 5, the modern debt machine. Money from nothing.
You would really think over the last 50 years we would have fixed this glaring issue, but we haven't. Today, 97% of all money is purely digital. It's not paper, it's not coins. And here is the real shocker, it is not created by central banks or the government. The vast majority of our money is created out of thin air by private banking institutions.
So how does a modern bank loan actually work then? While textbooks claim banks just act as middlemen lending out other people's savings, our source argues this is a complete myth. When you walk into a branch and sign a loan contract for $10,000, the bank records your promise to repay as an asset on their books, and they literally just type $10,000 into your account. Boom. In that exact moment, your signature creates brand new money on a computer screen. But hold on, because that brings up a truly mind-bending question. Think about it. If you borrow $10,000, but you owe $11,000 back with interest, where on earth does the extra $1,000 come from? It was never created. It actually doesn't exist in the digital system. The only way you can get it to pay off your debt is if someone else borrows it first. This creates a constant, infinite cycle where new people absolutely must take on new debt forever just so the old debts can be paid back.
So how does this infinite debt cycle impact our daily life? Let's consider 35 years of standard 2% compound inflation. Central banks always call a 2% target price stability. I mean, it sounds tiny, right? Totally harmless. But compounded over an average working life of 35 years, it quietly cuts the value of your life savings completely in half. The ruler is being intentionally shortened by 50% every single generation.
And this brings us to the absolute core of the great unlearning. Why would a system be designed to do this? According to our source, the answer is uncomfortably simple. The saver pays and the borrower benefits. When you inflate the currency, you pay back old debt with much weaker money. And who are the biggest borrowers on Earth? Governments. They hold debts so phenomenally large they could literally never realistically be paid back. But by intentionally shrinking the ruler, they can quietly inflate away their massive debts over decades, directly at the expense of your savings. The source argues that this constant devaluation isn't some glitch or flaw in the system, it literally is the system. Which leaves us with one final, incredibly serious question to ponder. If our entire modern economic system requires an endless, infinite cycle of new debt just to survive, what happens when we simply can't borrow anymore? Thank you for joining me on this explainer. I really hope these slides helped map out the hidden reality of our money for you in a completely new way. Stay curious, and I'll catch you next time.